to today's session. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's have a look at today's agenda. As part of this, we are seeing that the COVIDSafe Plan is something that agencies need to have a look at doing. We are going to cover off why is it important, what is this COVIDSafe Plan actually going to do, what is the role of duties of directors and officers in the company as well. Now, we've been running these COVIDSafe Plan sessions for the past number of months now, and with that, we've seen what actually works within the not-for-profit sector and really what is working and continuing to work very well. And I'll show you some of the case examples around this for you too. With that, what we are now seeing is looking at the legal compliance framework, policy directives, framework and structure, and also looking at some of the operational considerations that are now being seen. And we need to have a look at this from both a engagement of staff, but also what activities need to be put in place to actually see some of these COVIDSafe plans actually working. Equally, we're going to break this down into looking at what the plan should also consist of, what the policy requirements are, what the pandemic forms that agencies have taken on as well too, and also what is the monitoring that your agency also needs to look at as well. And in doing this, we'll actually show you some live case examples, and we also acknowledge some of the agencies that have agreed to share some of their learnings and information for these sessions. So as I've mentioned, one of the things that we are going to show you is what is actually working incredibly well right now, especially within this sector, and what you can actually start to look at today and adopt as part of the COVIDSafe plans for your agency. So by attending this webinar, what you should be getting is a timely set of resources that provide an overview of information that may be helpful to support your company, staff, volunteers, clients you provide services to. See what COVIDSafe systems are working and activities that companies have been doing that is actually helping them to operate and grow their service during this crisis as well too. And as I've mentioned, we'll show you two different case examples of what has worked and also what continues to work as well. So a few housekeeping items, and I can see a few questions are coming through on this as well too. So with this webinar is being recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session. You can put your answers into the chat lines as well too, and we will get to those as we go through. With it, it will also be recorded and published on our YouTube channel, and we are making these resources fully available, including these slides that we are also using. And also the knowledge base created from the questions will also be sent as a circular to attendees here or those that register as well too. So with it, what you can see is that you will be able to effectively view a lot of this information as well too, and receive the slides and other resources for yourselves to actually see as well. So let's actually have a look at the case study from Victoria. And what we've seen just in the last, since actually the 3rd of August, an announcement was made whereby the Premier actually turned around to businesses that were remaining open and said, look, we're going into stage 4 lockdown. And with that, from the 3rd of August, companies were given literally until 11:59 on Friday, the 7th of August, to enact a COVIDSafe plan. This plan was, they were told, must focus on safety, prevention and response in the event that a coronavirus outbreak is linked to their workplace and how they actually adjusted that. So this was quite a real process that a lot of Victorian companies had to go through if they were to remain open. It effectively covered a range of different companies, whether it be your general supermarkets, the grocery stores, bottle shops, pharmacies, other religious groups as well too, health and community services as well. So what we are seeing as part of this is the requirement for agencies to actually meet these requirements. And they were given a very short time to actually do it. Effectively, while the notice was provided on the Monday, the 3rd of August, from a case study point of view, businesses were effectively directed to close by 11:59 on Wednesday, the 5th of August, some 2 days later. And it meant then that as part of that, if you were listed as an industry that was allowed to operate, and this was taken from slides that we had delivered previously, was that then effectively they were asked to issue work permits and effectively by the next few days have a complete COVIDSafe plan up and operational. Even more recently, what we've seen from that time is that some Victorian Department of Health Service agencies have only been given literally 2 days notice by state departments to provide confirmation of what their COVIDSafe plan was and information on how they're meeting all of these requirements. So really from a case study point of view, it shows the level of detail that your agencies may be called on. It's how quickly things can change in this pandemic environment for agencies, literally like yourself, and how quickly things changed within the space of a few weeks. And agencies given notice to say, hey, if you're remaining open, you need to have your COVIDSafe plan in place. So obviously the question that comes up is when we talk of agencies, what we are actually talking about here is effectively not-for-profit community-based services. So whether you're a religious group, whether you're a health service, whether you're a company, effectively when we talk of agencies, we're talking of companies in this case. As late as yesterday, agencies were asked to provide status reports to the Department of Health on their COVIDSafe plan. And what we saw was that already with agencies that we've onboarded over the past few weeks, many of them were actually able to do this within a space of a few minutes and get reports back to their relevant state department in order to meet this. And this is what we're looking to help yourselves do as part of your own COVIDSafe plans process. One of the things that I will just mention here is that we have a large number of new agencies and companies joining us today. Just by background and introduction to who we are and what we do, over the past few weeks, we have onboarded some 2,000 companies to cover off exactly what we're talking of here around their COVIDSafe plan activities and effectively helping them manage what they need to do. And we're going to give you some of the resources and the portal that agencies are in fact using in order to do this, and specifically looking at what a COVIDSafe plan looks like and how to manage this moving forwards. As part of the work our law firm has done, this is more background than anything else and context. With this, we've actually worked with a large number, and our area is in the not-for-profit sector. We have, as part of this, taken a very slightly different approach to legal and compliance services. Rather than just doing black and white contract law itself, we actually have set up systems to support agencies run their general operations across HR, across incidents such as disasters like when we had the bushfire and swine flu a number of years ago, and even earlier this year as well too. So as part of this, the platform that I'm going to show you and portal that you're going to have access to is effectively this system that's been designed over the last 10 to 15 years as we've been working. A lot of other agencies have used it across because it is a portal application, which means that you can access this from basically any mobile device or even office-based system as well too. And it means that any of the legal updates, resources that you can get is effectively managed through this portal for you. And each of you will actually get access to this for yourself to access the resources as well. So let's have a look at today's agenda. We're going to look at the legal theory and the frameworks around what your agency needs to look at for a COVID-safe plan. We're going to look at some of the operational considerations and look at what's going on, and also look at what's worked for agencies as well too. With it, as I've mentioned, you will get a copy of all of these resources, including the template slides, and this webinar is also being recorded and will be made publicly available later today as we move through it. I'd also like to take the opportunity just to thank a couple of agencies that have equally shared their resources as well too. And there are two very different agencies as well too. With it, firstly, Rumbalara Aboriginal Corporation, and a special thanks to Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer. They're a large not-for-profit agency with some 200, 300 odd staff, and they provide a range of services from medical to justice to outreach workers to some of their general housing services as well too, and quite a diverse service agency. On the other hand, we've got Women's Housing Limited, and a special recognition to Judy Line here, the Chief Executive Officer. Both have agreed to share their resources and learnings out of this that we will cover off. They're a women's housing service specifically, and they've actually utilised a lot of resources in terms of designing their COVID-safe plan, including policies as well too. So it is something that both of these agencies we do recognise within the not-for-profit sector as well. So as I've mentioned, over the past couple of weeks now, we have been running these COVID-safe webinars. There are no silly questions that you can ask. A lot of agencies have attended these webinars quite simply because they're unsure of what questions to actually ask. They know that there's generally meant to be a COVID-safe plan in place, but are unsure of what this actually looks like. And essentially, we've had agencies from just about every part of the not-for-profit sector join these webinars and utilize the resources. This includes health, education, religious, community law services, Aboriginal services, museums, art services, as well as cafe and food banks as well too. There are some agencies that are closed for now but are waiting to reopen, and some that are continuing to deliver services. So wherever you sit within this space, effectively you'll get resources, and this will be relevant for yourselves. Now, looking at the legal compliance obligations, and let's just jump into this now as well. Effectively, the Commonwealth Government outlined a number of months ago the three-step framework for a COVID-safe Australia. And this was outlined as step 1, step 2, and step 3. When we look at the COVID-safe three-step framework, in each step, workplaces have been asked to develop a COVID-safe plan. And you can see this in each of the steps that I've listed here. And this is now reflected across other states and territories as well. Now, when we look at the COVID-safe plan, there is a lot of information. In fact, a myriad of legal compliance obligations and documents that are out there. There's the roadmap to a COVID-safe plan. There's things like the COVID-safe app that people have spoken about. There's the roadmap to a COVID-safe Australia. There's documents from Safe Work. There's legislation that covers things under the Biosecurity Act as well. And there's a whole range of materials that are out there, and no wonder that so many agencies are quite confused in terms of what is going on. And what we are seeing is the requirement for agencies to look at what it is actually meant to be doing. Now, the COVID-safe plan is meant what I'm going to say, meant to do, and what it is going to do for you as well. We are also conscious of and we've adjusted the microphone as well too for everyone. And with it, we will make sure that it is kept nice and close for people to hear as well.
So what we have seen is with the COVIDSafe Plan, when we say what is it meant to do versus what is it going to do. Now, when we talk about going to do, the outlines when we look at this across the Commonwealth and state government obligations is that it is meant to ensure that your staff are kept safe, community and services are supported and delivered, and that it changes as your business services change as well. It also means that it needs to access and continue to support you to deliver services. Now, what we have seen in Victoria at the moment is that there is already talks of class actions against aged care services. There's judicial inquiries into government management of the hotel quarantine scheme. And so what we're looking at also doing, and what it's going to do, hopefully for you as well, is to ensure that your company meets its legal compliance obligations under things like fair work, work health and safety laws, as well as public health laws, privacy laws, just to name a few. So with it, what the COVIDSafe Plan is hopefully going to do for you is not just do the first four things. And we know that the states and the Commonwealth have focused on these areas. Equally, what it should also be doing for you in your role as directors and officers of your agency and company is to effectively give you your legal compliance obligations and make sure that these are met for you as well. Now, why is it important? Well, effectively, the COVID-19 will be with us for some time. And with it, it means that your workplace needs to stay healthy and safe and virus-free. So this is what it needs to, why it is important to have it in place. For directors and officers, which most of you are, especially in your roles that you have, if you are a director or an officer, you need to exercise due diligence to ensure that your employees comply with their duties and obligations. And with it, what this means is that your knowledge to keep up to date of what your requirements are means that you should have a COVIDSafe plan that meets these requirements, but also gives you surety of what is actually going on. And we'll actually show you some case studies of what agencies have done in order to review this for you as well. Now, we have had a question that's just come through that I will jump to, and it just asks, do you think it's necessary to get a law firm to review a COVIDSafe plan for community events before proceeding? And it's a really good question. Now, with that, we do have some of the templates that we're actually going to give you around this. With it, I'll actually show you what other agencies have done in terms of attendance registers shortly, and what they've actually used in terms of managing some of their COVID-safe events as well. So thank you for the question, and it is something that we will also cover shortly for you. So when we look at the COVIDSafe Plan, what we are looking at its core is the legal compliance framework, the policy directives, and the framework structure to bring this together. As I've mentioned, this seems to be one of the key documents that agencies are referring to, and obviously coming from the Commonwealth. But equally, there is a lot of other information that is out there. This was a form that was set up by Prime Minister and Cabinet and has been circulated around. And it talks about the general overview of the business plans and requirements to look at. Equally, if we look at other states and territories, then they've come up with some of their COVIDSafe Plan guidance notes. And these are some of the things that we've seen over the past few months. Queensland has come up with its COVIDSafe business plans along with each of its staged response. You will note that even with this, we're looking at, on one hand, the Commonwealth talks about steps, whereas Queensland, Victoria may refer to opening up as stages. Western Australia has equally used a different language again too. They refer to phases instead of steps or stages. So you can see that there is a bit of confusion already in terms of how people are setting up and what they think they are expected to actually do. Equally, the Victorian Community Services sector has also put up the Community Services sector response, and they talk of the different stages, stage 1 to stage 4, in terms of how they're going to step through about it. And look, it's a great question that's just come through around people asking, well, what about staff members who are immune compromised and are asking for special treatment in the performance of their duties? And it is something that I will come to in terms of working from home, and something that we will unpack as part of this as well too. So with it, what we have set up is that when we go through and look at resources and information, we have set up to bring some of this stuff together, and you will have access to this, your own portal, which will give you the resources, some of which I'm talking about today. And I know that there are questions coming through on how do we actually manage this, but let's just step through where we're sitting at the moment with it. So let's jump to how it looks. What we've found that works very well is that agencies that have set this up since the start of the pandemic has looked at effectively a COVIDSafe Plan Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3. And this has been aligned with what the Commonwealth document is. And I'll show you what this directly looks like. In terms of the legal compliance obligations, effectively, if a business chooses to utilize the provisions of their COVIDSafe industry plan, and there are industry plans that are out there, it must operate under the relevant conditions listed under the roadmap for the public health directions. It means also if you are hosting a COVIDSafe event, and there was a question just before around this, then event organizers should monitor the list of approved COVIDSafe industry plans, and we've loaded these into your dashboard for you, to determine whether their event is covered up by one or more specific industry plans or measures. And what's important here is that organizers must ensure compliance with these COVIDSafe industry plans for the relevant components of your event. And that includes any specific approvals that you might need as well. As part of that, we've just got another question coming through that I will just mention, and it just asks, we assume that we would be following direction from New South Wales Health, but would like some advice on what deep clean might look like and how it has been handled in Victoria, for example, with animals as well. And that's a really good question, and I'll come to that when I talk of safe work guidelines as well too, and where it overlaps between your legal compliance obligations with policy directives versus state directives as well, and that will be coming up shortly. So when we look at the COVIDSafe plans, effectively what we are looking at is a number of different measures around this. And when we've looked at this across the different states and territories, in some shape or form, they are referring to these types of controls. So when we look at this, they're talking of substitution, isolation, or administration itself. And with it, substitution might talk of changing the way you do a current practice. Isolation means enforcing distance requirements, and administration means changing the way you negotiate to work or to allow social distancing to occur. And this might include non-essential meetings or trainings are provided by video conferencing as well. So essentially, when we have gone through what the states are looking at, effectively can be divided into a number of different sections. And this includes checklists. So for example, they talk of checklists for the companies that you work for. This might include requirements for keeping workers safe, requirements for social distancing, requirements for keeping your workplace clean to stop the spread of COVID-19. So these are some of the checklists that they that the states have actually recommended. It also then talks of the listings, and we've taken this directly from what Queensland have done here as well, but it's really relevant to the format in terms of your COVID-safe plans. It's then looked at best practice guidelines, and in this section they talk of specific measures your business should put in place to conduct a best practice safe business in terms of social distancing and public record keeping and obligations around good hygiene. And essentially what we've seen is, as we work through this, looking at conditions of entry for staff as well, in terms of how the flows of clients or staff come in and out of the buildings. You would have seen this from a lot of the supermarkets as well too, where there are specific designated queues to managing cafeterias. There might also be customer interactions as well too. And what we are seeing is that, again, how customers interact with you also needs to be considered. As part of that, we're also urged to look at communal facilities and spaces. And this section should consider ways that your company can safely manage communal facilities as well. And also managing things like egress and emergency situations as well, in terms of how to manage evac procedures. Again, there is requirements for staff practices in terms of making sure that your staff are kept safe by limiting physical interaction and workers and clients and also other persons that are visiting your site. Now, one of the important functions is also to ensure that staff are adequately trained within your agencies. And this is something that the Commonwealth has also focused as well too. So it's not just important to have a COVID-safe plan put in place. Staff need to also be aware of what it actually is and what their obligations actually are. So when we look at also public health directions, it's also incumbent that yourselves actually manage the notifications coming from your chief health officers or also state health departments for managing health notifications for your agencies too. There's also the need to review and manage risk management requirements as well too. So again, obviously making sure that due audits are taken and compliance checks to make sure that due process is being followed. A lot of agencies are also issuing and making public their statement of compliance to really show that there has been a undertaking by your agency to say, look, we've actually undertaken a COVID-safe plan, we've got it in place, and effectively printing, signing, and dating it and displaying it on your premises as well. So with it, when we look at the COVID-safe plan, and this is just an example of that, as I've mentioned, we have set these up for agencies, and you will have access to this, to divide these up into terms of the step 1, step 2, and step 3 obligations of what you need to effectively look at. Now, when we look at this in each of the steps, what we are seeing is step 1 is divided up into effectively requirements that you need to meet. Step 2 is then divided into slightly broader restrictions, and step 3 effectively looks at opening up. And when we work through this with agencies, you'll see that effectively it goes from 10 persons up to 100 people across it. Irrespective of this, your COVID-safe plan needs to show how you're actually doing this as well. Now, part of this is to ensure that your duties of directors are met. And as I've mentioned previously, it's important that you review your business policies and procedures and reporting to ensure that your duties are met as required by your agency as well. Now, as part of this, it is important to look at your work health and safety guidelines. And when we see this, we can see that there is 4 fundamental principles around this. And it means that you need to look at maintaining effectively 1.5 distancing and good hygiene, staying at home if unwell, frequently cleaning and disinfecting communal areas, and also ensuring your COVID-Safe Plan covers your workplace and premises. Now, when we see this, what agencies then turn around to us and have asked in the past is, well, what does this actually mean? And how can we actually manage our COVID-Safe plans in order to do this? And how do we know that we're meeting the requirements across this? So what we have done for you around this and with other agencies, and what has worked really well, is to effectively adopt a quality standards approach. And I want to just show you how this has been set up. A lot of requirements have been set up where agencies need to meet either their education standards or health standards, whichever sector you work in. There's usually quality standards that you actually need to meet as part of this. And when we've taken a quality approach, a compliance and quality approach across this, it looks at planning it, looking at carrying out self-assessments, which is a checklist that the state governments and territory governments want you to have a look at, drawing up your plans and then implementing it. So by taking this quality approach has meant that you can kind of run a self-assessment as part of your continued process and implement your quality safe plan. In doing that, what we have done is look at the legislation, things like the Commonwealth laws under the Biosecurity Act, look at each of the relevant public health and wellbeing legislation, whether you're based in WA, and also specific policy directives as well too. And I do think the question that's just come through around asking in relation to state requirements, what is the legal differences between what is in the law and what is recommended, i.e. social distances appears to have a number of recommendations which are not a legal requirement, e.g. handshaking, should it be banned or left to personal choice? And that's a really good question, John, around that. Now, what we have and how we've actually looked at this and what agencies have done around this is to look at, firstly, the legislation, as you can see on the top left-hand corner, and to go, what is the framework that we actually need to look at? And really, that's the compliance part of it. What we've then looked at in terms of the compliance framework is to then look at the, let's say, the Commonwealth or state health directives around this, which is based on the legislation around it. And there's just another question equally come through from Melbourne in terms of just saying our organisation is based in Melbourne where we are required to wear face covering. Is there any guidance on the training organisations are required to provide staff in respect of face coverings whilst working? And so taking that approach, and thank you to Luke from Melbourne just raising that for us. And again, so whether you're based in WA from what John just raised or what Luke just raised, we've looked at the legal framework around this, but then looked at what the individual state or Commonwealth government's directives are, and then also gone back and looked at some of the other regulator-based policy positions. And when I say regulator, what I mean by that is places like Safe Work, which covers your work health and safety obligations. And what we're finding is that there is a common thread that can say, right, from a Commonwealth directives, you are required to ensure that your staff are kept safe. That may vary depending on where you're sitting, whether you're in WA, whether you're in Melbourne, what your current measures are and directives coming from your health agency is. So there is this, and rightly so, a lot of people are asking us about the fluctuations at the moment that we are seeing. And that's why we're talking of, well, what is working within agencies around this and how is this covered? What this gives you, and I'll show you this in a minute, what this gives you is the self-assessment tools to actually say, well, how do we actually measure this? Where are we sitting at the moment? Those assessment tools can effectively be linked into your COVID-Safe Plan. So you're all correct in raising these questions of saying, if we look at just the COVID-Safe Plan, and you can see this diagrammatically on this slide, is that a COVID-Safe Plan on its own is just one part of what your agency actually needs to look at. If you're then saying, well, how are we going to ensure that staff are adequately trained? What is our notifications to inform staff about this? Do we have the training capacity across this in order to ensure that our staff are kept safe? And how do we, in fact, monitor areas for improvement as this pandemic continues to sort of, I'm going to say, unravel and cause service disruptions and things change either from week to week, as we've seen in Victoria, or raise issues in Queensland with potentially one person travelling on a plane in the last few days. And so there is this part of it, is that when we talk of staff, and I'll just also address another question that's just come through, and thank you to Chrissy raising this in the public space, was about what about volunteers for charities? Well, we describe sort of the general staff as also volunteers as well too, because they are providing and supporting services for you as well. So with this, effectively, whether you're a staff member or a volunteer, your COVID-Safe Plan effectively needs to cover both of these groups as part of this. So when we move across as part of the COVID-Safe Plan, what we're seeing is effectively what we're looking at is, if we look at the compliance side, yes, we've got that under the legal framework that agencies need to follow as part of that, but also looking at what directions are being put by places like Safe Work, and sort of trying to join these dots together and looking at, well, what are the self-assessment tools that can actually be used, rather than effectively trying to reinvent the wheel, but also give you the ability to actually give you that certainty, and also make sure that your agency staff and volunteers are kept safe, and it continues to actually manage that responsibility in an effective way. Now, as part of that, I also just note there have been a couple of questions just coming through where people have just asked, can a management plan, and I just thank Rebez for this, can a management committee of an association pass the responsibility of a COVID-Safe Plan to a specific section of the members who want to organise an event? I just am careful of the language here, Rebez. With it, generally the Committee of Management has a governance role, and as part of that, I wouldn't be saying that you can pass the responsibility of a COVID-Safe Plan. You can certainly, I'm going to say, delegate certain activities that they do in terms of meeting it, but you will need, as a part of your Committee of Management, you all do have a responsibility, certainly under work health and safety laws, to make sure that your agency staff and volunteers are kept safe. You do have that responsibility, as I've previously mentioned in this webinar, as a director and officer of the company. In saying that, you can, and I will show this to you around some of the forms that agencies have used, and also other policy templates that we will be making available for agencies as well too, in terms of the work health and safety requirements. So in terms of what employers need to do to reduce the risk of COVID-19, what we have seen coming from the Commonwealth directions is that there are, in fact, 14 separate items to actually look at. With these, couple of these was to ensure social distancing is supported, staggering working from home or having staff work from home where possible, trying to ensure 4 square meters per person and 1.5 meters between people wherever is possible. And they've listed a number of criteria that I'm just listing in front of you. And in addition to this, they've also asked to actually agencies to undertake frequent cleaning of workspaces, particularly objects and surfaces that are frequently touched, holding meetings, essential meetings only, and doing this via video conferencing, phone, or other ways, but also looking at avoiding non-essential travel. And one of the important items is also point 12 and 13 is to ensure that staff are adequately trained about in COVID safe requirements, and also ensuring that a policy is kept up that requires staff to stay home if unwell. Now, these are some of the 14 core requirements that the Commonwealth has actually put up. And it's in addition to with the obligations from Safe Work in terms of what people are actually required to do. What we are also seeing is that some of these requirements are also placed back onto employees. So when we talk of COVID safe obligations, it means that it's not just for yourselves as board members or executive directors that are joining us today, or volunteer coordinators, but also employees and volunteers equally have obligations themselves. So if they are working in the workplace or they are providing support services or outreach work, then essentially they also do have obligations that they need to raise. We have had just another question come through from Robert in the public chat group, just saying, glad to say that there's no silly questions here. I assume that most of the agencies listening in meet in a premises or building or some kind, and obviously a COVID safe plan is required. My question is, when a small group of people within an agency get together, maybe in a home environment, do we need to have a COVID safe plan in place? That's a really good question, Robert. With it, the COVID safe plan, and when we talk of the questions around this, is that what we are seeing is that the COVID safe plan is really for agencies of all different sizes and shapes as well. It is something that is really there to ensure that services are being delivered, that your group is kept safe as well too, and how you're managing that. Now, with the range of obligations that I'm talking about here will obviously change depending on the size that your agency's at. So we've had some, I'm going to say, quite large agencies where they've had to check through, and I'll say the legal compliance obligations around this is consistent across all agencies. So for example, saying, right, you need to have a COVID safe plan in place to ensure that services are kept similar. With it, we will be shortly showing you the COVID safe plan, and we will be sticking to about an hour in length for this session. We will just run over because we did have some microphone issues just at the start and volume issues. So we will finish probably just after 12 o'clock today if it is while it is being recorded. So with it, that said, we will also look at, in terms of how the COVID safe plans are managed, effectively looking at the COVID safe plan plus also what obligations and activities people need to have as part of their services that they're actually delivering as part of this process. So when we look at who is actually responsible for the COVID safe plans, what we need to see is, well, who is responsible, what is actually going on, and how do you actually manage this process itself? So let's jump through to what we can show you of what agencies have done in order to meet some of their obligations. And then let's actually show you how this has actually worked for agencies of different sizes as well. And let me bring this up to actually show you what has worked within agencies for you. So with it, firstly, Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative. Effectively, what they've got is their disaster COVID safe plan listed directly on their dashboard, and you guys will have access to this portal as well. With it, they've got policies, they've got staff training, they've got their pandemic forms, and they've got their registers across it. What they're able to effectively do is run their clear reports directly out of this as well. From that, what they've then been able to do is look at their policy requirements as well. And we've got effectively templates to give to all of you as well too on what effectively some of the key policy requirements your agencies need to look at. And it covers each of these 9 areas as a general policy templates that are available for your agency to use. So as you can see, when we've looked at this, the COVIDSafe Plan is just one part of it. And what they've then done is asked staff to look at a COVID assessment form to monitor their own staff and volunteers' health and well-being. They've got the working from home approval forms, and we've been asked questions around cleaning registers as well as workstation requirements as well. Similarly, Women's Housing Limited, and what they've done as well too, is again run their COVIDSafe Plan. They've got their policies, they've got their pandemic forms, and they've got their registers. So you can see a pattern starting to occur here. Now, when we look at the COVIDSafe Plan sessions for it, again, the one thing that they did differently was publish their plan directly onto their website and gave the ability for all of their clients to actually view their own COVID safe resources and updates. And that was something that was really important for them to actually do. But again, it followed this process of COVIDSafe Plan plus activities and assessment forms as well. Now let's just jump in, and what I will show you is effectively yourselves have access to your own dashboard, and it's a portal that we've opened up to allow you to view this information for you and get your COVIDSafe plans up very, very quickly. So with it, you'll have your own login. What effectively you can see, and this gives you a license seat to effectively use within your agency. And importantly, when you click on the disaster module, what will come up is this screen here. It gives you the ability to go in and update your own COVIDSafe Plan requirements. If you're based in WA, and I know that we've had Robert from WA join us as well too, for example, or even Luke from Melbourne, what this will do, because it's a legal compliance system, it'll actually spin to your specific jurisdiction area and your specific states. What you can go in is to go in to look at your projects. And we've already got the template set up ready for you. And if we click on COVIDSafe Plan items here, what you'll be able to see is you've effectively got your Commonwealth directives, as I've shown you, of 1 through to 14. It then covers off your safe work requirements, everything from workplace audits to cleaning audits to physical register audits as well. And also, depending on your state requirements, if you're in WA or if you're in Melbourne, then again, you'll have your specific items as well. Now, with it, what we have also done for a reference point is to load in the reference documents for you. And it also gives you the specific policy directives, whether that be from the Commonwealth directives. So if I look at, for example, under documents, and I look at the specific requirements that the Commonwealth put up, I can click on that, and it gives me the Commonwealth directives that I need to see as part of it. Here it is here. And it then lists the specific items of what we're relying on. Equally, if I wanted to ensure that there is changes to, let's say, safe work cleaning checklists, and again, we'll be updating these for all agencies to view. And if there was the specific cleaning checklist that you needed to look at, you can open that up, and you've got these checklists ready to go as well. And this is all accessed via the documents register. When you go through what the difference of what you can actually have a look at around this, and let's just go in, is that it gives you the workbook of what you need to do for your own COVID safe plan. And it gives you your core basics. And this is the important part around this. You can go in, you can update it. You'll see that it's got the details in each of these sections, so you can write your own file notes and say, I have completed this today. And as part of that, it'll give you the date and the time of when it was done as well too. And you can immediately see that. Now, when I mentioned that agencies needed to be able to produce a COVID safe plan upon request from their state health department, and we saw this in Victoria over the last few days. Let me show you how quickly this is reported on. So effectively, if a department calls, your state health department calls you and says, show me your COVID safe plan and where you're at, you can go in and you can use this. We've got the Commonwealth and your relevant state department requirements in here. You can simply go to this little button on the top right-hand corner here and click on report. It'll then print this out, and immediately you've got your COVID safe plan reporting requirements, and it's broken into your governance reporting, your Commonwealth directive, and also your state directives. So effectively it becomes your live workbook to effectively work across this. With it, it's not something that is major to look at. Let me be quite clear. Whether you're a small agency or a large agency, this is just a workbook to look at. There are smaller things, and look, it may well be that some of these ones, for example, let me just say this to you. If you have a item here that you say, look, we have to train staff. If you're a small agency and you have to look at training staff, and it might only be that you've got 2 or 3 people or volunteers that are working, then that's all you say. So with it, it's not as part of this that you've literally got to go through and say, provide this whole lot of response. It gives you this checklist to make sure I've just done what I need to get done. And that will give you the cheat sheets around it. What we've also given you around it, and I just raised it for Michelle, who's just raised the question of a small agency, is that we're also going to open this up. And what we've got for you as well too is policy templates. And you can find these actually in your, and I'll just go back to here, your documents section. Now, what we've also loaded in is also for you, and I'll just show you this here. It is essentially a Word document, and you've got your event and public register form as well too that you can also use. And it gives you that details to effectively utilize as well. And it gives you that area for you to use. Equally, what you also have is your assessment forms for staff that are also loaded on here. And this is something that we will be covering off in the next session. So this includes things like your assessment forms to make sure that your staff are kept safe. And these will change from time to time to assist you go through that process. Equally, you can also explore as part of this for volunteers and registers, just to make sure that you've got this in place. You will also have your HR registers as well. And if we click on the HR button, then again, what you'll have is the ability to manage staff. Oops, excuse me for this. You'll be able to manage your profile and actually go in and also have a look at key staff and information to register for both staff and volunteers. And people, importantly, can update this directly from their end as well. So it doesn't have to sit with just one person. With it, we've just been asked, will temperatures of staff and volunteers need to be taken every work day? That's a really good question, Robert, around that. With it, what we are seeing, and this is just an example of the forms that we have taken the clinical governance guidelines document as well too, which you can see up here. A lot of agencies are, this is when we've looked at sort of what is the best practice that has actually been working, is to actually look at if they are providing services to key clients that you have, you want to make sure that your staff are in fact safe and are providing safe services as well. So where this comes in for due process, agencies have simply been asking people to take a few minutes before they start and complete this checklist as well. It means then that you've got your key requirements met. It also means that if someone has ticked yes, that you're able to manage this really quickly as well. And we've seen this with some agencies. As I mentioned, Rumballara have done this. Women's Housing have done this. They've done this for some 200 plus, 300, 2 to 300 plus staff. Women's Housing have done this for about 50 to 60 staff. And what we are seeing is that when they've actually screened their staff as part of this process, it's actually allowed them to manage this very, very quickly and take appropriate measures. Because essentially what it's also prompting people to do is to also assess and make sure that they're meeting their obligations outside work as well. So it allows you to effectively do that. What we've also seen from some agencies equally is that where staff are working from home, then they're getting people to do that on a weekly basis rather than essentially on a day-to-day basis. So we will be, over the next few weeks, actually running through some of the how to implement the COVIDSafe Plan and what activities people need to do as part of this process moving forwards as well. So as I've mentioned, you will get access to this dashboard and resources. It is something that a lot of other agencies have found incredibly useful to use. It has meant, if just going back to this, that you will see that your COVIDSafe Plan is one part. We've just had an agency ask us, how do we get to our COVIDSafe Plan? You can do that by simply clicking on the disaster module that will open up into this, this section here. And that way you can go into projects and it'll actually list your specific areas to actually have a look at around this as well. We've just had a question from April, thank you very much, saying where are the requirements around requiring staff to do health status checks for on-site staff and then working from home once a week as well? That's a really good question. As part of that, we're looking this under the work health and safety obligations to ensure that either staff and clients are kept safe, and also looking for measures around on-site versus working from home once a week as well. So with it, it is around the work health and safety requirements as well, looking at, well, what systems and processes are you actually looking in place to ensure that your staff and clients are kept safe, and also ensuring that there is a safe work environment for them, whether they're working from home or also working on site as well. So with it, these are the processes that a lot of agencies have done in looking at setting up their COVIDSafe Plan. As you can see, it is one part of this for them as well. And we will be looking at over the next few weeks how to implement this and what are the links between your forms and also your other registers as well. So just to finish up, as part of and we will open up the phone lines and stay on the line to answer any questions that people might have. As part of that, we do make a series of recommendations for agencies, is to look at your COVIDSafe Plan should really consist of your plan, your policy, support letters, or actually the permits that people need to have, pandemic forms, as well as monitoring. The policies should also consist of not only what your agency is going to do, but essentially looking at the industry plans and Commonwealth guidelines. And we do have this in place as templates for you. We have set up the dashboard for all agencies to use, and you get access to this for one seat. And this is effectively a seat that we have given to all agencies to use. There is no licensing around agencies having access to a director or officer, or 1 seat for agencies. Obviously, if you do open it up to other staff, then there is a small licensing fee attached to that, and we will obviously send that out with all the materials. This resource is there for your agencies to use. With it, you are able to access it. There is no cost to effectively have 1 seat. So if you are even listening to this webinar after this session is live and listening to it on recording, it is something we have opened up for thousands of agencies to utilize as well too, and they have taken that up, and we have opened this up to over 2,000 agencies just in the past couple of weeks. It is something that agencies have found incredibly useful because it gives you a single source of truth and starts to join your dots together. It means then that if you wanted to actually run this, then you can start to utilize this resource and get access to it. With it, also from a policy breakdown side of it, the recommendations are to look at obviously working from home for it. We will be circulating it out as part of these templates for your agency to access. You can access all of these policies through the portal as well too, and it is there for yourselves individually to access. And look, if you take it off and you want to use it, then it's there, and other agencies have equally shared these policy directives together as well too. With it, we will open up the chat lines and phone lines, and more than happy to stay on the line to answer any questions that people might have. With it, we will just finish off here and say thank you for joining us. If you do have any questions after the session, by all means, please contact us on 1300 360 360 or email us at support@gemba360.com.